Hello, I'm Dina Benbrahim. I'm an endowed assistant professor of graphic design at the University of Arkansas. And thank you so much, Type Weekend, for having me today. It's really exciting to be able to share with you some Moroccan design works that are part of design history, but did not quite make it to any design books yet. So how about we all go for a little dérive together? And I really love this concept. It was coined by Guy Debord in 1956 as this unplanned journey through multiple spaces where basically people just dropped their everyday life commitments for just a tiny bit and wandered around looking for the unexpected. And this walk is very much the same in the sense that it is outside the European expected path. It is not a guided tour by any means, but it is a simple little dérive where I will share with you a few stories that have been left out from design history as we know it today. But before we start our walk, I would love to share with you this document that kind of kickstarted this entire research for me. So under the beautiful Maghribi script that we see here, it says that my great-grandfather received the land from the King Moulay Hassan I in 1875 because he was believed to be one of the Prophet's descendants. And honestly, coming across this just made me want to illuminate some Moroccan works to the design community so that they would stop being overlooked in general. For reference, the Maghribi script is a visual commonality of the region. This script is actually a direct iteration of the Kufic that you can see in the first two rows here. It is written with a sharp and pointed pen so that it produces this line of even thickness and also angular and swirling characters. It originates from Qarawiyyin in Fez, which is this intellectual center in Morocco, and that happened around the 11th century, and it stayed pretty famous until the 18th century. So let's start our walk with Tangier, because from 1923 until 1956, it was legally designated as an international city. And to me, it really gives a foretaste on, having multiple cities and ethnicities, languages and cultures coexisting together. And then after we do this, we will travel to the entire kingdom before shifting and chatting about some sacred publications and finally ending on publications with new ideas. So here we are in front of Gran Teatro Cervantes that was built in 1913 by Esperanza Orellana, Manuel Peña, and Antonio Gallego. And I really love these blue characters and multicolored ornaments. It's actually pretty amazing that it is almost still intact. The letter forms are noticeably following the aesthetic of the arts and craft movement. This movement advocated, as you know, for a keen attention to detail and really refined hand craftsmanship in opposition to what was believed to be a dehumanizing industrialization. And I think that Cervantes' sign is a beautiful reflection of these values, which makes it pretty iconic. And then we are in front of Café Hafat that has overlooked the Strait of Gibraltar since 1921. Fun fact, it has proudly hosted the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and other people like me who were in love with seriously amazing mint tea. From the outside, there's this hand-painted and sculpted sign with funky little illustrations. The Latin characters are alternating between capital letters and lowercase. And then there is Arabic hand-painted using a goldish color. But what I really love is that as we can peek here from the inside, there is this analog typography in here that is constituted with stones set on the cement wall. And the stones have like different thicknesses and sizes, which make every single letter form here super unique. Obviously, from a design standpoint, there are many inconsistencies, but this rawness, to me, makes it super special. Next, we find ourselves in front of the Perdicaris Park, which is a forested park on the outskirts of Tangier. Léon Perdicaris was an expat who had resided in Tangier and built a couple of structures in the early 1900s. And then in 1930s, he actually abandoned his property. So in 1956, after the independence, this became a public park. The sign that you see above is what I remembered from my childhood, and what you see below is what you can see today, which, you know, is a little more inclusive because it's actually integrating Tifinagh, which is the alphabet of Amazigh languages that are indigenous to North Africa. Tifinagh can also be found in Mali and Niger, but its origin is believed to be in Libya and could be as old as 400 BC. Then there is another theory that in the Tuareg mythology, its creation is attributed to a hero of civilization named Aniguran or Amamiyan. And in the 20th century, the script has been modified to take its current form, which is what you see in here, and it's called the Neo-Tifinagh. Now we are in front of the Cine Roxy. It's a very special place to me because I went to school a block from this theater. It has a beautiful historic neon sign on top of the building since 1895. It's pretty classic, you know, in terms of letter forms and beautiful balanced hierarchy and a cute tiny star on top. But there aren't many neon signs in Morocco, so it makes it actually pretty unique. Tangier's typography is truly timeless, and its timelessness extends to the entire country. So how about we travel now to the kingdom? We are now in Agadir in Morocco, but as one drives in the country, the pillars Allah al-Watan al-Malik, God, the nation, and the king would appear in various landscapes. These words actually close the national anthem and aim to unify Moroccan citizens. And if anything, they really are engraved in our minds. And here we could say that the letter forms are following the Kufic script. Now we find ourselves at Al-Qarawiyyin in Fez. Remember, I mentioned this earlier. It is a huge intellectual center, actually in the Muslim world of that time. It is also one of the oldest universities in the world. It was founded as a mosque by Fatima al-Fihri in the year 859, which is insane to me that this solar clock could be as old as this, because it is just magnificent and also superbly preserved. It has sacred scriptures all around using the Tulut script, and a little piece of metal conveys the time using the shadow made by the sun. Now, this is a 14th, 15th century epigraphic frieze that translates to what excellent companions are happiness and good fortune. It seems that the frieze is made of tile mosaic on an upper wall carved stucco. It is constituted of 4 panels coated in this black glaze, which was carved away to reveal the Tulut calligraphy on a background of foliate scrolls. This is a really common process in Morocco, but it's also extremely time-consuming and hard, super meticulous, and so it makes this a real treasure, to be honest. Now we are in front of the main post office in downtown Casablanca. It was designed by Adrien Laforgue in the neo-Moresque architectural style, which is basically an exotic revival architectural style that were adopted by white architects who were obsessed and fascinated by a romantic version of anything Oriental. And so this post office was constructed from 1918 to 1920 when Morocco was under the Protectorate, which, by the way, lasted from 1912 until 1956. And these blue tiles, along with the ornate floral and geometric patterns, are pretty characteristic of Islamic architecture, which in here contrasts nicely with the yellow Art Deco letter forms spelling post. You know, from one city to another and one street to another, there are so many time periods, movements, and cultures that are coexisting at all times wherever you go. And in addition, I think that growing up in Morocco meant that you grew up in a culture that rejected figuration, which means that geometric and typographic expressions are omnipresent in the visual language. And the complexity of meanings is certainly challenged by the prevalence of oral history. Although, to be honest, it's really my hope that sharing some pieces of this puzzle can invite all of you to complete a bigger picture. So let's drift now and talk about sacred publications, which included in Morocco religious and political spheres. There is an important Jewish heritage in the country, as many settled there to escape religious persecution. And Moses ben Maimon, who is better known as Maimonides, is one of them. He was a Jewish theologian, philosopher, and physician who fled Cordoba, Spain, to settle in Fez, in Morocco. Later on, he went to Cairo. This manuscript contains commentaries on the Mishnah by Maimonides, on Seder Nashim and Seder Moed. It has handwritten corrections by Maimonides himself, but also a few notes on the margins by his son and other people who contributed to this. And the headings here are set in Sephardi square script. This 1896 stamp is another artifact that showcases the influence of Jewish culture in the country. At that time, Moulay Abdelaziz IV was the Sultan of Morocco, and he stayed in power until 1908. The Star of David appeared in multiple stamps and coins of that time period, which, you know, may confirm the rumors that he wanted to get married to the daughter of the head of the Jewish community. You can see here some typeset Latin characters, but also some handwritten Arabic in there that honestly looks like it's coming as an afterthought. Also in terms of hierarchy. And the Sultan was working really closely with European allies, always seeking strategic and political advice, which certainly influenced the Spanish and French occupation that followed. And I feel like this stamp really summarizes in a condensed way the dynamics of that time. Let's look now at some special Qurans. FYI, manuscripts of the Quran are believed to be written manifestation of the divine revelation transmitted in Arabic to the Prophet Muhammad. The text was codified and standardized in the year 651 by order of Caliph Uthman. So it means that scribes are really having a special place in the Muslim world, almost a sacred space. This 13th century pink Quran here showcases a rectangular bifolium with 5 lines of text that are set in bold Maghribi script with diacritical and vocalization marks in gold outlined in brown, blue, and green. The verses numbers are in gold spheres, and the sajada mark, which is a prostration mark, is shaped as this beautiful gold drop. One thing to note is that the repetitive use of gold insinuates that this Quran was made for a royal or a noble, and definitely not for an everyday life use. Also, the pink paper is certainly original and unconventional. It is believed to come from the earliest paper mill in Spain, which is the town of Javita. We have another beautiful and unconventional Quran here. It is on green paper. It's also pretty big. It's a 22 by 17.5 centimeter bifolio that is coming straight from the 15th century, and it is showcasing 3 to 4 hizb, so divisions of the Quran. It is written also using the Maghribi script, and it has gold illuminations. A few diacritics are additionally outlined in red, as well as the prostration mark, which again leads us to believe that this is not for an everyday use, but it was commissioned by a royal or a noble. And then we're gonna go check this amazing 19th century calligraphic Quran in Maghribi script that is made by a doctor and herbalist named Al-Qandusi. He was a Sufi who lived in Fez. The Quran was once again commissioned by a royal. Al-Qandusi's calligraphy is truly wonderful. It's super expressive, unlike any traditional calligraphy. And this Quran is even more special because it's believed to have some healing and protective powers. Also, Al-Qandusi thought of calligraphy as a spiritual endeavor. Let's make a turn here and chat about publications with new ideas. And what I mean by new ideas is that they're pretty avant-garde for their time. This is Sharif Idrisi's circular world map that was published in 1154. It is oriented with the south at the top, which is so unique. But at the same time, most early Islamic world maps were oriented that way because many of the communities who first converted to Islam in the 7th and 8th centuries lived directly north of Mecca, and they thought of the south as the right direction of prayer. The earth here is surrounded by the sea and further away by fire, which is a metaphor taken from the Quran. Another curious thing to me is that the African continent is dominating this map, which is unlike any map I've ever seen before. These are posters and tickets that advertise bullfights at Plaza de Toros. It was actually built by the Spanish and inaugurated in 1950. It was divided into 3 parts. One is located in Tetuan, one in Hamad Mrabit, and one in Hamad Trawa, which are neighborhoods in Tangier. The last bullfight took place in the 1970s. And, you know, here the visual language is very much iconic, but also following the influences of the time. What's really precious to me is this ticket on the top left because it has some psychedelic type, but it is dated in 1935. Knowing that the psychedelic movement was officially happening in the mid-1960s, this is quite a treasure that may convey that experimenting with Art Nouveau aesthetics leading to the psychedelic movement itself might have happened way before. Next, we have this amazing an avant-garde magazine called La Malif. It is a monthly magazine that was published in Casablanca on cultural, social, and economical issues. It had this political and critical tone to it, using French as its language of expression, and it was, you know, there to challenge mainstream and stereotypical narratives. This cover was published in July 1966, and that was when the military service was made compulsory for Moroccan men aged 18 plus. So I suppose that's what the text is referring to. But visually, you can also feel the modernist influence using a limited color palette and a type-heavy composition. This is Nasriwan's gold record. Nasriwan is such a huge, engaged political band in Morocco. Their lyrics are like fire. to be honest. This gold record is mixing Kufic and Maghribi scripts as well as hand lettering, which juxtaposes some photography in there. And the cover by Polydor here reminds me of Sa'at al-Tanfit, the Hour of Execution cinema press book cover that was designed by Abdel Sharif in 1928, and also juxtaposes a similar hand lettering style with photography. I think it actually captures the Egyptian influence in the visual language in Morocco, which was pretty prevalent also at that time. Now we have a 1976 newsletter by Association des Femmes Marocaines, which is a feminist organization that was created by Moroccan students in Brussels, Belgium, to fight for women's right, precisely Moroccan women's right, and against their economic, social, and legal oppression. So the context is that after World War II, Europe was looking for cheap labor to rebuild the countries. And in 1974, Morocco and Belgium had this agreement to exchange labor. So there is a huge wave of Moroccan men immigrating to Belgium that happened then, which obviously led to women immigrating too. But this was not foreseen by the Belgian government at that time. And Moroccan women really lived in degrading, awful conditions because of this. So in this context, l'Association des Femmes Marocaines was born, and it was led by Rachid al-Idrissi al-Yaqoubi. You know, the cover is really raw. It's hand-painted, super straightforward. The newsletter is also typeset using a typewriter. So nothing really fancy, but it is a visual common language of feminist publications, and I think it is really worth documenting because of that. Last but not least, we have these beautiful 1980s covers of a publication by the collective Berber Rabat, focusing on Amazigh history and culture, which is, to be honest, pretty revolutionary for the context of that time. So an important point in the history of Tifinagh is that this essentially a very much ancient writing system was only recognized legally by the constitution in Morocco until March 9th, 2011, which is right after a February 20th protest that rose along with the Arab Spring. After the Protectorate in 1956, there was a major effort called the Arabization to impose Arabic everywhere, and it was an effort to decolonize the country. But Amazigh and honestly even Moroccan Arabic became a collateral damage in here. And this not only hurt our people and the legitimacy of our culture, but also the collection of works that we could have had today. It is true that nomads don't collect unessential documents and they disposed of them. So it certainly influenced the fact that the current archive is thin. However, there was a political move behind it as well, and it's important to recognize. Similarly, Moroccan Arabic that has been heavily influenced by Berber, Latin, Punic, French, and Spanish, it's the most spoken language in the country, and yet it's not being institutionalized as an official written language because of our colonial past, geopolitical hegemonies, and social fractures. This was our humble and tiny walk together. This is just the beginning. It is a seed that I wanted to plant in here. And actually, I learned very recently that to be able to take a picture of a black hole, we needed a telescope of the size of the Earth, which is obviously impossible. But what's possible is that we have multiple telescopes in various places in the globe that would snap a picture at the same time, and doing this would constitute the picture of the black hole itself. And the metaphor that I'm trying to get at here is that we really need a radical collective effort of everybody, whether you're just a curious person or you're an educator, a student, a designer who want to find out more about their culture or another culture that is outside the European spectrum. Only then, I believe that design can have an honest portrayal that is free from cultural genocide that is led by the belief that design only happened in Europe during the industrialization. So let's keep unlearning, let's keep learning, also sharing a constellation of stories to tell better stories, but also to design better. I hope we get to continue this walk together with deep conversations. Thank you again, Type Weekend, for having me today, and thank you so much for attending. Let's keep in touch and let's chat.